All right, let me put you up on game. In the 80s, James Brown really started it. James Brown and Little Richard. Little Richard, I believe, was first. But James Brown is somebody that personified it because Little Richard got picked up by the majors. Like, he basically sold out early and was doing shows and doing all these other things. And Little Richard cut a deal. So even though he was doing all those songs and they were Good Golly Miss Molly and he cut off his band and all that, when they had to go to town for these for their shows or whatever, let's say back in those days they have the white band that's coming into town and they want to promote that, they're going to spend there on the radio station. They're not going to really promote your show on the majors. So they're going to promote this big band that's coming through. So the promoters are going to, even though your show might be the same night, to prevent your show from taking away from theirs, they would pay the radio stations. And this is where payola was created. They would pay the radio stations extra money or do favors, saying, oh, my artist is going to come to your station and he's going to do 30 minutes or he'll do 45 minutes of radio time or promo, for the tour and everything else. And y'all can have an interview with him. And this is going to, propel the station, right? And how they got over what James Brown did was he went around it. Black folks used to just hang up flyers. They would take these flyers and they would have the printouts of the bands and they would just post them on light poles and stuff all around town. So the brothers knew where the show was going to be, so that's all they cared about. So they would just promote in the hood. But they still want to hear them records. But how do you get to the white people market? James Brown figured that out. James Brown went to those radio stations that had just a couple of hundred, they was on the same station or might have been real late at night. And they'll find that DJ, the guy who really listens to records, who working hard, who there all the time hoping for his big break. You give him the record because he going to play the record. He like it. And he going to cross the record over for you. He going to play them for the spins. You give him a ticket to the show, that's all he need. And next thing you know, he doing it for free. You find 5 guys like that in town on these radio stations. Next thing you know, your song is on the radio. Then they advertising the show. That's how it starts leaking out to other people. And they start hearing the records. And once they hear the records, it's on. See, in hip-hop, by them putting up barriers and exclusion rather, of you can't come here, that just made it liver and made it easier for hip-hop artists in a John Doe business how to survive and navigate at this time when this industry is growing. By them saying you can't do this and putting up barriers, that helped it. They needed those barriers. The worst thing they could have did to hip hop was let it all just come on in. Everybody just come on in. Do what you want to do. It would have destroyed itself within. But by them making exclusion, it made them say, okay, we really got to bust these barriers and doors down. It gave them something to work towards. And it showed them a structure on how to market. See, all these record companies, there was all these record stores. All record stores was everywhere. You had D&D Records, what they call the mom and pop shops. Because back then, a lot of black people owned businesses, family-owned businesses. And, they had the little store, and they might sell some records, some 12-inch vinyl records, or cassette tapes or whatever. So the hip-hop world figured this out. They said, in these neighborhoods are kids that are working at these mom and pop stores. They're teenagers. So to get our record across, we just got to do a show in a town, visit one of them stores, go out, sign a couple of autographs, sign a couple of records, and we good. If we come to one, just one, we probably can have the whole town or the whole place sold out. Just showing up at once, but we gotta have the hit records. We gotta have the records to go. And if we got the records to go, they don't have to be on the radio. The people are gonna know because the people in the store is gonna sell it. They care what the people in the mom and pop shops got to say about it. People buy records based on their opinions. The hood don't trust the radio to tell them what's hot and what's not. And they'll play the certain songs 600 times a day. The streets wasn't looking for that anymore. They weren't looking for the bubble gum. They wanted the real. They wanted the hip hop's news. They wanted the hip hop stations. Then back then they had boom boxes. Guys would have a tape or what they called back then before the maxi tapes, put them in there, play it on the boom box, and then they would carry it everywhere they went. NWA sold 2 million records because it was being excluded, saying you can't have it. Once the people said you can't have it, that made every kid in America want to grab it. It's something that's being withheld from us. Oh, we got to hear that. And once one person got it, it spread it. So that's how NWA can sell 1 million records across the country with basically almost no radio play. Redman had been out so many times in Jersey and doing all these things here and always was selling gold. EPMD, and they weren't even getting on the radio. I think it took Redman, what, 4 albums, 5 albums to finally sell 1 million records? That's just how in tune he was. That's how much focused Redman was at the time. Like Red was, he didn't care. Like if Redman sold 1 million records and he didn't have to leave his block on major networks, they weren't really trying to spin his records. He basically was promoted in Jersey. They played him in New York and on the East Coast, so rappers really didn't have to travel. They were held down in the mom and pop stores. So believe me, every mom and pop store was banging at Redman. Redman didn't have to come to your town. You knew when Redman CD come out because you was in the mom and pop stores. You was listening. So when they do come to town, you really trying to see them. They got around the radio. They got around the payola. It wasn't affecting them. And then those artists who was able to, what they say, cross over, like the LL Cool J's, they never really had that problem because they were already accepted by the majors. They were on Def Jam, but LL was already had crossed over with radio-friendly songs. So they were going to keep his in high rotation. He was going to have some rotations and spins and being the best and headline the shows. He was a top tier. Run DMC was going to get spins. So what you have is a what I would call the unfortunate drawback of losing our way. We lost our way. We got too greedy for our own good. They knew how to hurt us. They said, how is this continuously moving forward? Meaning hip hop. And the artists that we're trying to push and we're putting all this money behind, nothing's happening. But these other guys who have no marketing and no budget is selling the same amount of records. And that's what they end up calling ghetto gold. They selling 500,000 records. They was eating good. You go gold, you had a career. Now, it wasn't that rappers didn't want to ascend and hit that radio chart. They did. They made the radio joints, but you had people who didn't deem it a necessity to play it. When Redman had Tonight's the Night, they didn't want to play it. People even requested it when they called up there and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're not that kind of radio station. We don't play that kind of music here. Sorry." And they hung up on the guy. And he called and requested to hear Tonight's the Night by Redman. So radio was starting to change because younger people were saying, "Hey, this is the music we're listening to." And don't think this was just all white folks. Black folks was hating too. Because most of the black folks was like my mama. You know, this wasn't their brand of entertainment. So they were all thrown in one big jumbo pot. Or gumbo pot, rather. Where they put R&B, soul, and rap in the same category. You know, LL Cool J should never have to be going up against Anita Baker. You know, it just didn't make any sense. Blacks were the only people to eventually get smart and say, well, we need a rap category. But Grammys and American Music Awards was like, well, we're only going to put that in R&B because that's all it is. It's rhythm and blues. Now, the money was starting to dry up because the record companies were just throwing, it's like throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping it stick. And all these big marketing things that they didn't spent money in artist development, getting all these artists who couldn't perform, rappers who couldn't really rap, and putting them in all of these different situations where they supposed to be the next big thing. And then they turn out to be nothing. How many times you seen an artist start his career out, be the hottest thing in the world, he's in all the magazines, and then it turns out to be a dud. It turns out to crash and burn. And they spent a lot of money in marketing, promotions, rollouts, and the album just don't move. And you see someone with no money, no production whatsoever, but they moving. That was driving record companies crazy. Because they were like, we spent money to sabotage that album. How is it still selling? So they targeted the mom and pop stores. Start shutting those down by putting Walmarts and Targets in areas that they weren't even allowed to. Because that used to be a law saying that you can build those type of supermarkets in poverty-stricken areas, or an area where the income level was it's at a bare minimum. That used to be a law. They lifted that law in the 90s. And once they lifted this law, it was fought by a lot of people here in the state of Illinois and worldwide to stop these super conglomerates from coming in and absorbing all of the revenue from small mid-class businesses. But a judge approved it and let it go down, and it was done. And it killed the small to middle income families, mostly the mom and pop shops, because that was high value real estate. And all it was gentrification. Especially here in Chicago, we saw it live. And those who didn't want to sell, they went through a 2-year construction project on one of the busiest highways in the city of Chicago. They drug it out for 2 years. And what that does is rerouting people around the streets so they couldn't stop over there to go and shop at those stores. They couldn't get there if you're coming off the expressway. So that hurt their business. Then they're going up against a Target right across the street from them. That's hurting their business. They can't keep up with those prices. Their prices are $7 to $8, probably more than the prices that they have at Target. They can't give you that wholesale rate. Target can afford to do it. So what they're going to do is they know the people are going to go right across the street to Target and they're going to buy it for $11.99 rather than pay $16 and $17 for the same album at the mom and pop shop. And they just don't get it. The clothing store that was next to it, the guy owned both. He had the clothing store next door and he had the record company. Target sells clothes. Target sells food. Target sells movies and music. That's two stores that's about to lose their business. And in that store, right across where that Target used, that he built the Target, you know how many multi-platinum hip hop artists has been on that store? We're talking the Wu-Tang Clan, Keisha Cole. The list was on and on. Some of the biggest names in hip hop was in that store. They would stop there when they came to do a show. Outkast was there. Um, Naughty by Nature stopped by there. They would always stop by that store because they always would sell. And the mom and pops would have the records before anybody. So they would sell it first because they nobody frowned on that. They was like, hey, we still getting the money. People want to buy it early, let them buy it early. Get it to the mom and pops. You can get it on a Friday instead of waiting on Tuesday. You can get it that Friday or even that Thursday if it came in on a Thursday. You can get the record. So that's why a lot of different people, or what you would say entertainers or entertainment in this industry, that's how the mom and pop shops was keeping their doors open for so long. It's because they had the exclusive. They had them on the streets before the majors. So that's how they really made their money and their quota. Sometimes they sold out their whole box, depending on who the artist was. So when this transformation was starting to happen and take its effect, I would say around 2001, around that time, it's about 2001, 2002, maybe 2003, the changes was coming. Um, a lot of them started to sell out. A lot of people held on for years. There's still people that's holding on because the people, the beauty salon shops over there, they still holding on to their property, even though the rates have went up. But hip hop artists used to can go gold in their own neighborhood was because the community was so together and they were so excluded with everything else. They were like, okay, well, cool. We don't want to be a part of your thing anyway. We're not fighting to be a part of that. We got what we need right here. We had that understanding that we took care of each other. And this was even in the 90s. When they was like, you can't come to these awards and we don't want that music here, we was like, bet. We did not want to go to Manhattan anyway. We like it that it's right here at the Apollo Theater. That it need to be. Hey, let's go. Keep it at the Apollo. We do not need to go down there. And you're probably saying, what changed? Well, the numbers changed. Those guys they were spending all their money on, they were losing out on. All of those people over the years were getting older, and the younger generation were now buying the records. Their children was buying the records, and those children were not buying old R&B records. They weren't buying Lionel Richie. They weren't buying Anita Baker. They wasn't buying Jody Watley's and all of these. They were buying the people that were around their age or young and was hip hop. That was the new curve. It was in the schools, and that was what was ruling. And they were seeing that, and the record company said, look, we're being stupid. We're gonna miss our bubble, but we gotta get a control over this thing because right now we have no control over it. They have all the control, which they did. It was free reign because no one cared what hip hop artists did. So, hip hop artists were signed to bad deals on major labels. And when they started doing that, I mean like 10 albums, contracts, and they're like, you're going to spend a lifetime getting out of them because they have to decide to release your music. You just can't make 10 albums and say, hey, I'm done, I'm going to bounce. You got to have 10 released albums. In some of these contracts, some people have 15 album deals. It was crazy excessive that you were never going to get out of these contracts. And people were still signing them just to say they were on a label. And they promoted the labels like crazy because they felt like I'm part of it. I'm part of this family. And I'm like, you hear all the other artists that was on there. You never hear like Anita Baker talking about the label she's on none of her songs. You never hear Whitney Houston singing about the label. Rappers were singing about labels and promoting a label they didn't even own. That was mistakes that were made in the industry. That was a huge mistake. I think that was a big drawback because we're empowering something we don't own. And it's been the known thing with us. We always give power to things we do not own. And we boast and brag about them. We boast and brag about Jordans. We boast and brag about Lucci Gabbana and Ben Salanga and all these other things. We're always building and boasting about other people's wealth and making other people successful. Gucci, Louis. We would promote other people things more than we would our own self. That's why they keep doing what they're doing to us, because they know we're going to do it. You've been programmed to think this way. Your programming started a long time ago. Commercials, television, music, movies. So it's not like someone's smart and you're dumb. No, this is trillions of dollars over years that has been spent in programming to make sure you stay in that faction of acquiring things that don't appreciate with value. They're worthless moments you buy them. While everyone else is taught a different program. They're taught economics. They're talking investing, savings. They have financial advisors, financial planning, estate planning. None of this is designed for you, but it's designed for them. And they want you to stay dark on those subjects, even the rappers. How many rappers, that we've seen today even rap about that? Nope. It's about Louis, Gucci, and it's brag, 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 brag. Even the one that's supposed to be the smartest of all of us, and they call him the king, and Jay-Z, right? All his rhymes are materialistic. And even the ones that aren't keep centering around selling drugs and how much money he got. There's no growth. They're empty words. A lot of his stuff don't stick because it's empty. This is how hip hop started to fall. When your words are empty and you're just saying stuff just to get some money. And they brought in all the marketing dollars. They opened up the books and said, bring in that advertisement money, show money. See, that's how artists used to get paid. The record, they knew they were getting screwed over on the records, but the artists would do shows and get 10 G's a show. You know, be like, all right, cool, 10 G's, boom, we got this show, that show, get a 5 G's here, get a 10 G's there. They're making a living. This is the 90s and 80s and that time. They're making a living at this time. They're crushing it. Shoot, by the end of the year, you're making 70, 80,000 a year. And you might got one album out. So whatever little crumbs you made off that, you built your name up. You're getting free videos, your name, notoriety, even with no sponsorships. You being invited back to different things, other doors opening up. You're getting more shows. You're featured on someone's album. So rappers learned how to market by doing shows and getting around. Most of these artists now, they're signed and they ain't even did any shows. They ain't even performed in front of 1,000 people before. And they got record contracts. Most of these people have never been to cities. I knew rap artists that didn't even have deals and was hanger-ons, roadies. They're on a Greyhound bus choking off fumes of the bus, setting up the equipment, microphones and everything, just so they can go out there and say 1 2 1 2. I'm just saying. They had to pay their dues. Mostly every rapper was a DJ first. Let that sink in. Mostly every rapper was a DJ first. They were DJs. You know why? Because they had to, that was the only way they were going to get to the mic. Is they were the DJ and they was to get a house party going. They'd be like, oh, let me DJ it. You a DJ? Yeah, I'm a DJ. They can get to the mic and they can work on stage presence and they learn how to move the crowd, what songs to play. That's how you learn your audience and get your name out there. Then you start grabbing the mic and rocking the mic. So almost all these guys were DJs first. Almost every rapper in the game was the DJ. Coming up. It was a couple of artists that figured this out, mainly because they were from smaller markets. East Coast controlled the hip hop world. So they didn't think out the box. They thought, I got New York, I'm good. But people down south, people like Outkast, Dungeon Family, people out west like Spice One, Too Short, they were trying to expand. New York is what everybody wanted to conquer back then. You gotta conquer New York. And New York is rough. Because you ain't from New York, they don't even like you. But MC Hammer had an opportunity. He went to New York and they dissed him really bad. Run DMC, mostly DMC and Jam Master Jam. They just dissed him. You know, this was an independent businessman, black, who had 30, 40 miles and a band to take care of, and other artists that he had signed with him, that he was managing their careers. He was taking care of these people and making sure they were okay, as well as him. An entrepreneur who was selling 60,000 records out of a trunk of a car. He had sold over 60,000, or made about $60,000 rather, selling records out the cassette tapes and stuff out the trunk of his car. So that shows you the spirit is there to sell if you knew how to do it. But what he didn't do is sell himself as an MC. And this is before Turn That Mother Out and all that stuff really hit. Those songs was already out on the Bay, and they was taking over the Bay. So Turn This Mother Out was already out. Like, it was way before we saw a music video, before New York got it, and the Midwest, because the Midwest was rocking with it. When the first album came with Turn This Mother Out, but he was basically in-house, because nobody was really trying to say, oh, we need a feature with MC Hammer. You know, he was not the guy that people were calling to for all this stuff. But West Coast artists who was basically connected were doing this as a marketing plan. Like Too Short. Short Dog actually went to all these neighborhoods and would do features with all these artists when he go to town. If he do a show in St. Louis, he gonna do one. He come to Chicago, he gonna drop a verse with somebody. And he was doing this in the 90s. Like, he'll do a show somewhere, Nebraska somewhere. He would get on a joint and drop a 16 on somebody's album or somebody's record. He was going from place to place and doing this because he wasn't going to make any more albums until Jive Records gave him the money that he wanted. And he wanted $1 million as a signing bonus, basically. And that was the only thing that was going to keep him from leaving Jive Records after his last deal. So he basically didn't make an album for a long time and just did features. And he was making more money off features, basically, than he did for making an album. And going through all that money and the budget and getting a band, you know, so what that was doing for Too Short was keeping him in the game. He had extended time, you know, like nobody asked how old Too Short is. Nobody even cared. He was one of the rare artists who transcended time because he's never changed his style. His style has been the same, and it's relative state by state. He's lax. He gonna come to you, your hood, chill, smoke a blunt, kick it, rap, and leave. He was always cool. That was his motto. He was never on no, I could whoop your ass, and he was never that guy. So Short Dog can transcend in every city, every state, mostly the Midwest, because that's pretty much country. So down south, St. Louis, Chicago, Tennessee, all of these places, the vibe, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, all of these states are on that same vibe. So if you go to New York and you tackle New York and get them to get to some of that vibe, or just get some people to vibe with what you're doing, then you got a whole new market. So till they got New York, they went around it. The Midwest was rocking with him. The down south was rocking with him. And this is how the West Coast was making a move. And this, in the end, end up helping Too Short whenever they go do shows. People go and deal with Short because he came down there and gave a 16 to somebody from their town. They ain't forget that. They gonna come out and show love and support. He might have forgot what town he was in when he dropped that. That 16. But you know what that's doing? That's networking. And let's say that artist blow up one day. That artist never gonna forget when Too Short came down, when he was a big artist and he was just starting out, and he gave him a feature or did a feature with him. And it got his foot in the door. Now that guy blow up. What you think he gonna do for Too Short? All of this was done without radio. People working with people. And today, we act like we can't work with our own people. That's one of the biggest problems we got. That's gonna lower my brand, and I can't do that. So that's a hip hop moment. Just wanted to get that off. Want to say love, peace, and hair grease. Hopefully all y'all did what the banner said. Y'all been hitting the like button. Class was in session. Now it's out. Join the Patreon if you haven't already. You should already be on there. But if not, definitely do that. And I'm out.